Do you have constitutional questions? Get constitutional answers. We'll be answering your constitutional questions live, so get ready to call in now. Are you a prosecutor, law enforcement officer, or local government employee? Want to make sure you are executing the laws in a constitutional manner? Are you a city council member, township board member, or state legislator? Want to ensure the laws you pass are constitutional? Perhaps you're a citizen who wants to know the proper limits on government and the protections for your God-given liberties. Regardless of your role, call me, Constitutional Attorney Catherine Henry, with your constitutional questions during our live call-in show now at the phone number listed on the screen. And remember, together we can restore freedom.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, guys, we're going to try this again. It never fails that we have technology issues, and what can I say? When you're trying to do good in the world, evil has to intervene the most it can. So I apologize for that, but on my end, it shows I've already been live for 12 minutes now, and apparently you guys are only seeing me go live just now. So welcome to those of you who are just joining us or new to the channel. I'm Constitutional Attorney Catherine Henry, and I really feel like I shouldn't repeat all this that I just went through in the first 12 minutes, but we'll go for it. I encourage you guys to call in today with legal and constitutional questions that you have. I do want to give you the disclaimer that I'm not licensed in all 50 states across the U.S. I am admitted to practice law, however, in the United States Supreme Court, 2 federal district courts, the state of Michigan, Michigan Tribal Court, the Saginaw Chippewa Tribe, and I have been admitted pro hoc vice in some other courts as cases have needed it throughout periods of time. So at any rate, I'm Constitutional Attorney Catherine Henry, and I welcome you to the show today. I'm going to go ahead and put up that number to call in. It is 616-303-0093, so go ahead and pick up your phone and get ready to dial if you have any questions of a legal or constitutional nature. 616-303-0093. Hello to John and Troy and yeah, YouTube doesn't like the truth. Let's see, did we get anybody? Okay, so I'm not sure if we'll have much of a reach today because it's, you know, with the technology snafu, and by the time we got up and live for real, people might have thought we gave up for the day. So at any rate, go ahead, and if you have a question you just want to type, Lori has put the example where you put the word question in all caps and then type your question after that in regular capitalization. It helps me to, as the discussion develops in there, that I can scroll through and try to see those questions as best as possible without skipping over them, especially as there's a lot of conversation. So all right, so let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and switch. Let's see. There we go. All right, so I while we have people considering calling in with their questions today of a legal or constitutional nature, I wanted to remind you guys, or let you know if you didn't hear already, of the 2 short videos that I did called quick clarification videos that I released within the last week. So last week I released Can Trump Mass Layoff Federal Employees? We have touched on that a few times in our prior call-in shows, but I wanted to go ahead. It's an important enough point, and it's receiving certainly a vast amount of litigation on that point from a variety of different lawsuits that the Trump administration is being hammered with. And some judges are getting it right and some judges are getting it wrong. So we went ahead and did a quick little video. I want to say that one is the 2-minute video. No, that one's a 6-minute video. Anyway, then we did a 2-minute video, a quick clarification on extravagant government spending. So again, it's something I did a post on last week, but you know, I had recently watched a video with my daughter. I wanted her to see some, you know, iconic videos or movies in our culture that kind of speak to technology or history or, you know, something that was going on in our society at the time. And one of them I wanted her to watch was Independence Day because it was so long ago, yet it foreshadowed some things in some ways. And no, I'm not talking about the aliens, but just different technologies and ways to see different technology. And lo and behold, the whole idea of the government is hiding things, even from, say, the president. If you ever saw that movie or recall, the president was, you know, at that point unaware that Area 51 was a real thing and that there were real aliens and a real spaceship being stored there and studied there until quite a bit into the movie. And as he's being toured through the facility, he said, well, how do you get, you know, funding for this? You know, this costs a lot of money. And one of the other people walking on that tour said, well, you don't really think they spent $20,000 on a hammer, do you? So that line was like, you know, ringing bells for me, especially as we're having the Department of Government Efficiency uncover all of this extravagant, you could say, if not outright illegal and certainly fraudulent government spending. And somebody actually brought that up in a comment in one of my YouTube posts about the uncovering of this. And keep in mind, you guys, for those of you, I have a loved one who does not see eye to eye politically with me and has not for the entire time I've been a conservative, okay? And this person has known me over 40 years. So, I mean, I know I'm only in my 20s, but she's known me over 40 years. And she said to me just a couple days ago something about Elon Musk and how dare Elon Musk have anything to do with the government. Elon should have nothing to do with the government. He should have no say in being able to fire government employees or do any of this stuff because he's not elected. And I said, that's really ironic considering what he's doing. The only people he's firing are not anybody who's elected. Absolutely not. He's firing or making the recommendations to fire mass amounts of people whose entire jobs are not necessary for the government. And she said, well, but a lot of those people are veterans and they're people that have worked there for many years. And I said, I don't care because no person is entitled to a government paycheck. No person is entitled to be a government employee. It's not an entitlement. Working for the government is a service. It is a sacrifice. It is not an entitlement. And it's disturbing what people think. Now, I agree that we should bend over backwards to serve our veterans who have given the ultimate sacrifice and given many lesser sacrifices. We need to do everything for the veterans and their families that we can. I am very proud of my father-in-law who served in our military. But he's one of the many that he doesn't feel like anybody owes him anything. And that's how a lot of veterans, if not, dare I say, most veterans feel. But regardless, it wouldn't be a civilian job. Student loans, student grants to be able to go to college, finish college, and be able to integrate into the civilian workforce. I'm all for that for veterans, or certainly unending medical care or, assistance with housing or whatever types of things might be needed. But that is not anything to do with an entitlement to get a ongoing paycheck from the government in a civilian capacity upon retirement or discharge from the military. So no government employee ever is entitled to just keep getting a paycheck, because when you're in that role, you are serving the people. And if the people no longer need you in that position, if that role itself, because let's be realistic, guys, the Department of I keep saying economic, the Department of Government Efficiency, it's all about the economy. It drastically affects the economy, but it's the Department of Government Efficiency. What they have done, the positions, the people that they have laid off, they are not going in and singling out this person, singling out that person. No, what they are doing is saying this entire department, or these, this entire group of people, thousands of people at a time, are being laid off. That position is no longer necessary. The irony here is that you have all these people that are in the unions. There's more government employee unions that I ever even have heard of, and I think that speaks volumes about how big our government truly is. But anyway, you have all these unions and you have these government employees that are causing this big stink and saying they're not even going through and making an individual determination. They're just indiscriminately firing large groups of people. But let's think about that. If they got their wish, if let's say it's all on Elon, right? It's not. It's the department heads and, coordination, and he's largely in part just making recommendations. But let's say, for the sake of argument, it's Elon himself. He's going into each of these departments, and he is, let's say all these people, these government workers, these unions, they get their wish, and Elon goes in and he makes an individual determination. He's like, oh, well, this person didn't send in their 5 bullet points. This person didn't pass their pulse check. This person refuses to come back in to physically work in the government facility, and they just want to keep working from home. This person, whatever. This person hasn't accomplished a single thing that's of the benefit to the American people in the last 2 years. This person is claiming that they work full-time for us, but we have just realized that they're working full-time for somebody else. At any rate, there's a lot of different things going on. If he goes and makes individual determinations, what are they going to do? They're still going to file lawsuits. Only those lawsuits are going to be characterized as, well, this is discrimination. He's discriminating against me based on my age or my sex or the color of my skin or my sexual orientation or sexual identity. No, Elon's not going to give a crap if somebody's identifying as a woman but they're a man, or, the color of their skin. He's just getting rid of government employees that are being wasteful. So it's just mind-blowing to me that you have these people, largely liberals, right? All these liberals are screaming that how dare they do these mass layoffs? They should be firing us on an individual basis. But the second that they start to fire on an individual basis, they're going to start screaming, how dare they discriminate against me? They fired only me. They didn't fire everybody in my little department here or everybody in my little, work cohort. They only fired me. Well, oh my goodness, people. You can't have your cake and eat it too. But regardless, I encourage you guys to check out those 2 videos because they actually go hand in hand in a lot of ways. But Trump certainly has the authority to push for those and to actually go ahead and execute the mass laying off of federal employees, because the largest sector of government employees, of federal government employees, are under the executive branch. So we only have 3 branches of government. Remember that, people. The bureaucracy, as it's been known, as it's grown for decades and decades, it is not a 4th branch of government. Our constitutional republic, and nowhere in the Constitution does it allow for a 4th branch of government. We have a legislative branch, we have an executive branch, and we have a judicial branch. I can't even talk today. Judicial branch. Those are the only three branches of government that we have. So we are not allowed to have a fourth unidentified, unelected, appointed with Senate confirmation put in place type of situation. No, the only people that we have in government should be, according to our Constitution, it calls for specific appointments to be made. And there can be appointments made by the president. There can be appointments made by the judicial branch. There can be appointments made by the actual departments themselves. But there is nothing that prohibits the president from firing people within his own branch, even if the heads of the various departments are the ones that have done the hiring. There's nothing to say President Trump can't do restructuring and say, you know what? Yeah, this department may exist. Maybe we have a Department of Education, which we shouldn't, but maybe we keep a Department of Education, but it only has 10 employees because it's only going to do this function, and this function. That's it. Well, we wouldn't need the thousands of other employees that are currently in that department. So he could literally take the positions out, and then they don't have, the people that work underneath him, they work for him. They're in a department that is within the executive branch. He is the chief executive of the entire country. They are not even elected. When you have the, sorry guys, my allergies are killing me and I feel like I'm going to sneeze about every 3 seconds here. So if I have weird facial expressions and pause in my speech, that is why I'm trying not to sneeze into the microphone. But if you have, I cannot think of my words today, but the heads of these departments, right? You have the head of the Department of Education, you have the head of the Department of Transportation, you have the head of alcohol, tobacco, firearms, all these other, the head of the IRS. These are not elected positions. So the irony for me, when you have liberals, not just the one that I love dearly, who had this conversation with me earlier this week, but you have all these liberals that seem to think that someone like Elon Musk has no right to be anywhere near making any kind of recommendations on getting rid of these federal employees. Let's think about that. Why do those federal employees have any right to be in that position? That position doesn't need to exist. And that is what is happening. When you have mass layoffs, it is because the position does not exist. So, for example, in the technology industry has gone up and down and up and down and around, all around for decades, right? Because technology changes. And if your company cannot keep up with the changing in technology and you're still working on MS-DOS, right? You can't figure out how to get to Windows or whatever, pardon the analogy, but it's the best I got right now. Then, your company's going to fold. So my dad is a computer programmer and he's a genius. I mean, literally genius level IQ. I'm really proud of my dad. So he has been employed by this, I don't know if it was always an international corporation the whole time he's been there, but I think it started as a much smaller corporation in Minnesota, many, many years ago when he started. I was in 8th or 9th grade, when he started working there. I think the beginning of my 9th grade year. So it's been a long time. It was in the 90s. And anyway, when he started working there, he was part of a group, right? A little work cohort, a small group of people. I don't know how many people. Let's just say it's 7. So he has this group of 5 to 7 people that he's a part of. And then, he works for several years and then all of a sudden, there's, a downturn in the economy or, the company is bought out or, you have these changes that impact the company-wide that have these significant changes. And so then they start doing these mass layoffs. And I remember that there were several times where my dad was really concerned that he would get laid off because they were literally laying off everybody, like an entire department. Well, here's the thing. and my dad can correct me if I'm wrong on this. He usually does listen to the shows, but I am pretty sure, I'm pretty confident that I have this correct, that my dad was able to make it through where they would, several times in the company, where they literally laid off every single person in his work cohort. His whole department no longer existed. Now, they saw value in him as a particular employee and said, you know what? This whole department doesn't exist anymore, but we need Bruce over here in this department. And then he'd work there for 5-7 years, whatever. And then some big change would happen in the company again. They're like, ooh, yep, we no longer need that department, but we still need Bruce. And he would make it through several rounds of that as the years have gone on. I mean, now it's what, I don't know, 25, 30 years, 30 years, I think, that he's worked for them. And might even be longer than that. He's worked there for a very long time. And the amount of knowledge in his mind is just mind-blowing when it comes to, you know, programming and all the other things that I can't even grasp. I struggle with clearly getting live. You know, apparently the go live button doesn't go live by itself. You have to go live and then go live again by hitting the same button 10 minutes later. But anyway, so my dad is much better with computers than I am. And he made it all the way through. My point in all this is did it suck? Was it bad? Was it, you know, unexpected? Did it impact families? Yeah, all those things. But the company didn't owe those positions to anybody. In fact, that was my own family growing up. But, you know, what about my family, my current family? I mean, my husband. My husband was working for a company, Precise Engineering, in Lowell, Michigan. And I was pregnant with Emma, very pregnant with Emma. And all of a sudden, one day, my husband calls me and he said, I had just done a mediation in Grand Rapids and I was having some lunch at, I don't know, like a Chipotle on the Beltline and near Plainfield, for those of you in the Grand Rapids area. Anyway, I was sitting down to lunch there, and very, very snowy day in January. I mean, roads were terrible, but I was getting on my way back to Belding, where we lived at the time. My husband called me and he said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sitting down to lunch. Why? What's going on?" And he said, "Well, the company has just informed me that they are laying off. They're selling." And they're switching focus, and they're basically laying off everybody. And there weren't that many people in that physically worked at that location at that point. I want to say it was like 8 people. I mean, it was like, 8 to 10 people. And I said, "Oh my gosh, they're going to lay you off?" Now, keep in mind, I had my own law firm and I wasn't doing freedom fighting cases at that point. This is before I ran for state rep. This was before I did a lot of the constitutional stuff, before I ever got admitted to practice in the U.S. Supreme Court. I was doing a lot of bankruptcies and divorces, custody, parenting time, real estate, day-to-day needs for people, drafting wills and, basic estate plans and that kind of thing. So I had my own practice and I was getting ready to have a baby. So my practice was going to have to take a sabbatical, and I certainly didn't have insurance through my own practice. We had that through Mike's job. Well, and mind you, we had 3 other kids who were 10 and 12 at the time, 10, 10, and 12 at the time. So anyway, my husband said to me, so they decided they're laying off. And I said, "Oh man, my goodness, when is this going to happen?" And he said, "Well, they told me to go ahead and clean up my area and have it all spick and span by noon, by lunch today, and that I was done." And I said, "Are you serious? It's effective immediately? No notice? Are you serious?" So there we were in the middle of the month, and I was literally 3 days, I think it might have been a Friday. And no, I think it was Monday. I think that was a Monday. And then Emma was scheduled to be born by cesarean that Wednesday. Great times. Great times. So, so 2 days later, I was expecting to give birth, and then we had no insurance. and no income. And of course, we didn't qualify for Obamacare because, they thought we made too much money, even though that money was no longer coming in. But, all kinds of great stuff. So anyway, we did qualify. We just qualified for a very exorbitant amount of money. It was going to be like $40,000 a year for deductibles and premiums. Anyway, so the thing is, did that company is that the right thing to do to go in when it's a mom and pop shop, when you've known these people for I think Mike had worked there on and off at that point for 18 years. It was either 13 or 18. It was a long time. When you know these people, when you've seen their kids being born and, growing up and, it's a small town. Is it the right thing to do to give them no notice whatsoever? Absolutely not. However, do they have the right to do that as a company, as an employer? Do they have the right to do that? Yes. There's no entitlement to the paycheck other than to the paycheck for the time that has already been worked. Was it the absolute worst timing for us as a family? Yes, but we weren't entitled to more other than, on a morality scale, but legally, no. And it's the same thing with the government, only it's way worse, I guess, or more, I don't know, there's even less of an entitlement there to a paycheck, to being on the payroll, because the government is serving the people, and the government sole purpose is supposed to be to protect our God-given liberties. And if the government is not doing the function, if they're doing anything else other than protecting our God-given liberties, they are stepping outside of their role. So they can only do what the Constitution allows them to do. Anything beyond that is too much, and it's outside of the scope of their authority. And the vast majority of the things that they're doing right now is outside of the scope of their authority. But when you look at it through that lens of what is the government even allowed to do, you realize that then, we have 3 million employees that work for the federal government. 3 million employees. I believe that's the majority of those are the ones that are full-time government employees. At least last figure I saw was like 2.8 million full-time employees. That's insane. We're in the top 15. The federal government is within the top 15 of the largest employers across the entire country. That shouldn't be, because the government shouldn't be doing that many functions that it needs that many employees. So anyway, just a different way to view that entitlement to a paycheck, to, I should be able to work for the government. I've been working for the government for decades. You can't just take away my job. Well, is your job necessary? Is it allowed by the Constitution? And by the way, were you elected? Because if you were not elected, you absolutely have no entitlement or no right to that office whatsoever. As I would argue, no government employee should be there who wasn't elected. But, at any rate. We did get COBRA for a few months. Somebody was asking about a COBRA coverage when my husband was laid off. We did, but I want to say it was far more than what we could afford. I mean, we had no job. I wasn't working. I had purposely not taken any cases since getting pregnant, didn't take any new cases, and was, dwindling out the cases that I had and finishing things up. There was one big case that was a family law case that I told the client, listen, I'm not, I can't move up the court date. They're not working with me on that, but we're going to have to pause on that because this baby's coming. But at any rate, I had no income coming in because I purposely was freezing what work I would be taking. And, Mike, as Emma and we were stuck in the hospital for a week, which felt like an eternity. Because, she was jaundiced and she had some stuff going on when she was first born, and they wouldn't release her, and they tried to discharge me. And I was like, over my dead body, that baby's not leaving my sight. So if you think you're keeping her, you're keeping me. And the only time she was allowed out of my sight was when Mike had to be with her. Even if he had to leave me alone, I don't care. You stay with my baby. Because nobody in that hospital is going to have my baby and stick her full of all kinds of who knows what they want to do to newborns. Nuh-uh, not doing it. At any rate, he spent the entire time in the hospital when he wasn't helping with Emma's issue, or then when she was ready to go, then I stood up one day and he was trying to help me walk to the bathroom, and my stitches opened up, and it was a whole big thing. And it was, I've never seen a look of horror on my husband's face quite like that. I mean, that was pretty bad. So, anyway, no, it was too much. We didn't have any money coming in to pay for the Cobra coverage, but I am sorry. You guys have had the conversation going here, and I haven't stopped to see. Okay, there was a question a long time ago. Sorry, John, I did not see your question. How do you get equal justice in the courts when you can't get through the front door of the courts? Well, that is a loaded question. I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but I can tell you I've experienced that myself. Because when I was unlawfully and violently arrested on Election Day 2020, while serving as an attorney, when I was arrested and then had a 2-year case pending until the judge finally dismissed it, but for all the wrong reasons. Anyway, when I had numerous hearings and I would go to the courthouse, they tried to prohibit me from coming in because I couldn't medically wear a mask. I had a doctor's note that said I couldn't wear a mask. And besides which, they can't force you to do that. We've had lots of conversations and videos on that anyway. But at any rate, I could not physically wear a mask, and I let them know that, and they would prohibit me from coming in. And at one point, they actually prohibited Mike from coming in. And when another hearing, they let him come in, but they kicked him out. And it was like 17 degrees outside, and I had the car keys. And I didn't know that they had kicked him out, but they kicked him out of the building in 17-degree weather and said, no, you're not allowed in the courthouse. Not because he committed any crime, but they didn't want anybody they knew was supporting me and was there for my hearing in support of me. They stopped from coming in the building. But the people that were my supporters that came in before me or that weren't clearly with me, they let in the building, no problem. So yeah. I definitely know what you mean about not being able to physically get through the front door of the courthouse, but I'm not sure if you mean that or if you mean some other, you're talking about that as a metaphor or something, exaggeration. Let's see. Are the courts and police going to honor our right to travel without license, insurance, plates? I just received a stack of tickets plus car impounded. Well, are the courts and police going to honor our right to travel with it? So here's the thing. I'm intrigued by this because, first of all, I'm not one that thinks that we need to have a license for virtually anything. I may have been able to come up with examples before, but off the top of my head now, I can't think of a single example of a license that should be allowed to be required, right? For example, a license to practice law. You need a license to be able to practice law, but I think it's total garbage that you have to have a license to practice law because you should be able to study the laws and be able to share your information. For example, I live in Florida, and I have had 2 cases now in the Florida Court of Appeals, and one of them is currently pending, and it's been there for over a year. And I've had court cases pending basically in Florida since we moved down here because of the nightmare we encountered when we first moved down and the sellers that wouldn't sell us the house that we had a contract for sale and everything else. Anyway, the whole nightmare that case was, and then dealing with the city on our current house. The sellers were great, but the city is a piece of garbage. Anyway, I've literally read every single statute here in the state of Florida. I started from the top. I went all the way down. I've read the Constitution front and back several times. I've read all the court rules. I've read hundreds of court cases here in Florida. And when it comes to issues of municipal law and some of these things that I am continually reading on, now I haven't memorized all the statutes and court rules and things like that here in Florida, but of the things that are relevant to the cases that I've been working on, yeah, I know those particular laws and rules way better than most attorneys licensed here. But they are allowed to give advice on that, and I can't, represent somebody in court without getting, pro hoc vice admission. And I think that's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. But it is what it is right now. Driver's licenses. Clearly, there's idiots out there that have driver's licenses that should not drive. Or I could say, I've been a public defender in 2 different states, because I started off as being an attorney in Minnesota, and then I was an attorney in Michigan. And being a public defender in both states, one of the most common things that I would get is where my client was charged with driving on suspended license or driving with no license or something of that nature. So we know that happens, right? It's not like the people that don't have a license always go, well, I just can't drive. Or driving a car that's not registered. It happens. I have someone very near and dear to me and my family who was driving a car with expired plates for quite a while. Even though I kept saying, dude, you're going to get in trouble. Dude, you got to fix that. So anyway, it's not that I agree with that they should be able to do that. My philosophy is you got to live to fight another day. Okay? You can't be ready to die on every little anthill, right? You got to be willing to make it through all the small battles to be able to wage the big war. And I think we should get rid of all the requirements for licensing and the registrations and all that BS and garbage and fees and paperwork and government knowing everything about your business. I think we need to get rid of it. But in the meantime, until we do, I think you got to play their game. I think I play their game because I can't be distracted by those small fights when, I'm not going to win that fight right now. And I want to wage the fights that I can win right now and build on that and build on that. So I don't know if that, if you share the same philosophy. Now, if everyone had the philosophy that we're not gonna get driver's licenses, we're not gonna get vehicle registrations or insurance, we're not gonna do any of that. If everyone did it, then I'd say, okay, I'm gonna join that. Absolutely. But I can't be, I don't have it in me to take on that fight knowing I'm one of, 100,000 people in my small area that are doing it. You know what I mean? So at any rate, what other kinds of licenses? Should you have to have a license to cut hair? A barber's license? No. Should you have to have a license to, I don't know. I can't even think of things. What are all the things you need a license for? You have to have a permit or a license or whatever you call it, depending on the jurisdiction, to have a freaking garage sale. Should you have to have a permit or a license to have a freaking garage sale? No. What about a lemonade stand? No. What about, a business license because you want to have a pop-up tent, every Saturday to sell your crafting goods? No. You shouldn't have to have a freaking license for that. Do you have to have one? The way the laws are currently set up, yes, you do. Should you have to register your vehicle? No, I absolutely don't agree that you should have to register it. I agree that there's benefit to registering things. There's definitely a benefit. There's definitely a benefit to being licensed, not a requirement of being licensed, though. Hear me out. So there's a benefit to registration, and that is if something is stolen and you've given, let's say my car is stolen. Let's say there are no laws requiring any kind of forced registration or licensing, okay? Let's assume that's the law of the land right now. And, but you're allowed to register. I would consider registering my cars if I felt like there's a chance, there's a likelihood. If I lived in the city of Chicago, I would license my vehicle because there are a lot of car thefts in the city of Chicago. And if my VIN number is on record as being mine, and they know that, and they have the, the plate and the description and this and that. Well, I mean, there wouldn't be plates if it's, whatever, but you know what I mean? If there was a way to have that identified so that if my vehicle in a high crime area was ever stolen, then I'd have a better chance of getting it back and having it be identified and having the police do something about it. Then yeah, I would consider doing that. If I lived in the middle of farm country, though, where we used to live in Belding, Michigan, Atisco Township, no, I'm not. I probably wouldn't register my vehicles. Licensing. Here's the thing about licensing. Licensing, it's kind of like specialties for, what do they call it? So, for example, I'm a Michigan licensed attorney. That's a requirement to practice law in Michigan. But you can go and get additional certifications through the Institute of Continuing Legal Education and some other things, right? So you can go and get a certification to be a family law specialist or an estate planning specialist or things like that, right? Now, it's not required because I did hundreds, if not, I've worked on thousands of family law cases in 2 different states as an attorney, as a mediator, as, all kinds of things, right? I've worked in those cases in a lot of ways, but I never went and did all the specialty training and got a certification other than being licensed, right? So if you think about it that way, it's not a requirement, but it's something that might be able to be used as a piece of advertising to give your customers an extra sense of comfort. I could see that. So, for example, if the whole, practice of law, if being licensed in any state was voluntary, I might consider doing that as a marketing strategy if I felt like I needed to go out and tell people, hey, I have passed this official level, right? I've passed this, the bar exam. I've made it through law school, whatever it is. So, but, a lot of those things would change, right? If those licensing requirements weren't there. Because in order to get licensed, you have to have passed your state's bar exam. In order to take the bar exam, you have to have completed your legal education at an ABA accredited law school. And, it's like a cyclical thing, right? One thing's required, then that requires another thing, and that requires another thing, and that requires another thing. And that's the way it is with all kinds of licensing, business licensing, whatever. And then the idea of insurance, no insurance should ever be required because they don't pay out for crap anyway. They don't appropriately cover. I've been involved as a case evaluator on, let me pause and say a case evaluator. You have 3 attorneys who sit down on a panel and they look through a civil case and they determine what they think, is there a cause of action here? Is the plaintiff likely to succeed? If so, how much money would they be likely to recover? And if the 3 attorneys can all agree on an amount, there's a case evaluation award, and then the parties can choose to go with that and if or not. And if they choose not to do that, then depending on your jurisdiction, there's different ramifications. So you could choose not to do that and go ahead and go to trial. But then if you go to trial and you don't win any better, you don't get any better than what you would have received had you just taken your case evaluation award, then you might have to pay the other side's attorney's fees, for example. So something like that. But at any rate, I've been involved in it from that perspective. I've been involved from a party. I've been a party/attorney representing our family in where insurance did not cover something it should have absolutely 100% covered. And in the end, the other side even agreed. When they won, when we walked out of the courthouse and our minds were all blown because the judge totally screwed up, they even recognized it and said something to me on the steps of the courthouse on the way out. At any rate, I've been, I mean, obviously I have homeowners, I have a mortgage, so I'm required to have homeowners insurance and that kind of thing. It's awful. It's awful down here in Florida. I mean, it's far more money for homeowners insurance here than it is there. And by the way, don't say it's because it's all the hurricanes. No, because they don't cover crap for hurricanes. And there's a separate, you have a deductible, but you have a separate hurricane deductible if you even have any kind of coverage. Oh, but that doesn't cover flood. So if there's any kind of flooding because of a hurricane, if it's still considered flood damage, then you don't have coverage at all unless you buy an entirely separate policy. So for all those people that are saying, well, you choose to live in a state that has a lot of hurricanes, so therefore obviously it makes more sense that your deductibles would be higher on your homeowners, you better check your facts, because that does not even remotely cover the facts of the situation. They won't cover anything. They've never covered anything for any damage we've had from hurricanes. So anyway, and a lot of people that I know. Okay, so sorry, I just happened to notice a comment from my husband, and I have no idea what I was talking about at the time, but I'm going to go ahead and see if there are any other questions that... So my point is, licensing can be beneficial if it's on a voluntary basis. Registrations can be beneficial for property or things like that on a voluntary basis. It's kind of like, you know, you could choose to specifically itemize special assets on an insurance policy. Good afternoon. This is Catherine. Who am I speaking with?
Hello?
Hi, this is Catherine. Who am I speaking with? You have my voice in the background a little loud.
Oh, is this Lori?
No, this is Catherine. You've called the live call-in show. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I'm on the, I got appointed to the zoning hearing board. And we're going to have a case on a group home. And this will be my first case that I've ever gone through. And the residents are in an uproar over this. And I'm trying to figure out what would be the best way to handle this. Because they want a special exception for the group home.
So what is the code that's prohibiting them, or what exception is it that they're seeking?
Just to have the group home in a residential area.
Okay, so it's
Just
okay. So the group home. So your current zoning does not allow for a group home to be in like a single family residential zoning district or something like that?
well, here's the dilemma. So they're changing the zoning ordinances, but the council hasn't voted on it yet. But the zoning officer is using that code. We never had anything for a group home, but our attorney said last night at the planning commission meeting, even though the zoning hasn't been approved, that they can still go through with it. And I disagree with her on that because it hasn't been voted on by council.
Okay, so there's something, so the new thing that hasn't been voted on yet that specifically allows the group home to be there or disallows them to be there?
It allows them to be there, the new one, but the people are in an uproar over it.
Okay.
It's very, the way that the
let me ask you this. Is there anything in your current zoning ordinance that specifically prohibits the group home from being in that residential zoning district?
Yes, the old one, the old zoning ordinances.
So
the new one,
but the old
they
one
put it in, but they haven't passed it.
But hold on, there's a difference. What we're talking about. That you said the new one specifically allows it. But the old one, does it specifically prohibit it, or does it just not have a provision that talks about them?
No.
No, what? Does it mention group homes at all? The old one?
Not in the old one.
Okay, so then if it doesn't specifically mention it, then it doesn't specifically prohibit them either.
Right.
So, okay, so here's what I'm saying. If you don't, now, as to what the attorney advised you, that you can go ahead and rely on a new ordinance, a new zoning ordinance, before city council has actually approved of it, that is a load of garbage. That attorney should be disbarred because they're an idiot.
Yes,
So no, you
she's an
cannot.
idiot.
Yes, you cannot rely on a zoning ordinance that is on any ordinance, on any law that is not actually enacted properly yet. However,
Thank you.
when it comes to this other issue though, if you have a use of a property and they're trying to use it for residential purposes, it's not like they're trying to put a strip club in there. They're trying to use it for residential purposes in a residential zoning district. And you're saying, of course, I haven't read your zoning, code, so I don't know if there is something in there that might do something. But from what you've said, there's nothing in the current code that specifically mentions these group homes. Because they're not mentioned, they're not specifically prohibited, right? If there's nothing that covers in there that specifically prohibits them, then they're allowed. Because what our government, if they are, even if they have the authority to limit the use of our own property in some way, it has to be, if it's a law, it has to be in the books. Our Supreme Court in 1881, I think it was US v. Boyd or US v. Byers, they, I've quoted it many times in recent briefs, they have spelled out a common sense notion, which is if there is a law, if something is a law and it's going to stop someone from doing something they otherwise have the right to do, then it has to be in the books. And if it's not found in the books, then it's not law. So there's nothing that prohibits them. So if your current code is silent on that issue, then it doesn't mean that they don't have permission. It means that they're just not prohibited from putting the home there. So it's like this. When COVID happened, right, in 2020, I started getting tons, hundreds, if not thousands of, when I started doing the videos like this, when I was just getting phone calls and text messages and emails. And the most common thing was people were asking me, well, where in the law does it say I have the right to, and fill in the blank? I have the right to be in public without wearing a mask. I have the right to keep my job without getting an injection jab. I have the right to, keep going to college, whatever, I paid tuition and at a public university, and they're saying that I can't go because I don't want them to keep checking my temperature every day, or whatever it is, right? People kept asking me, where in the law does it say I have the right to, and fill in the blank? But that's not the way we need to look at this, because the government doesn't give us our rights. The government is not the source of our rights. So we don't have to look to the government for permission before we act. So if we want to do something, as long as it's not, directly harming somebody else. If you want to rob someone and steal their property, you can't do that, right? Because it's directly harming somebody else. But if you want to use your own property, or you want to do something in a way that's not harming somebody else, generally speaking, you have the right to do that. And the government has a pretty high hurdle that they have to meet in order to be able to stop you from utilizing your rights in that way. So if the owner of that property wants, I don't know if they already own it or if they don't own it, but let's just say they already own that house.
Yeah.
And they want to put in a group home, whether they want to live in that home or whether they want to rent it out, or whether they want to open it up to, I used to work in a group home. I had 4 developmentally disabled individuals, women, that lived in the group home, and I was a direct support professional. I helped them with their day-to-day stuff. I did that while I was in college. So that home was smack dab in the middle of a single-family residential zone district. So, and that was in Minnesota, but law is very similar to Michigan or, many other states. So my point is, though, when that property owner, they have a right to utilize that property Certainly, if there's not a specific law that prohibits them from using it in that way, then they have a right to use it in that way, whatever that way may be. Okay, so this might seem like a silly example, but let's say they want to paint their house bright pink. And somebody, you know, the city, like it's right in smack dab in the middle of town. It's on the parade routes. It's near the whatever, the elementary schools and the bank and the courthouse. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, that would be hideous. We can't have a bright pink house in the middle. You know, it's going to be, our town's going to be the laughing stock of the county, whatever, right? And so people are all up in arms. They don't want that. And they're trying to stop them from doing that. Unless there's some legitimate law on the books that specifically says that they can't paint it some, you know, certain color or something, they have the right to do that. I mean, I realize that's kind of a weird example. I'm just trying to give you different ways to see the same thing, that it boils down to the fact that the property owner has the right to use their property whatever way that they see fit, as long as they're not harming somebody else, and as long as there's not a legitimate law on the books that prohibits them from doing it. So you don't have to wait for a law to get on the books that specifically allows them to do it, because their rights to use their property don't come from the government.
That's exactly what I thought. From what I'm reading in the laws, I'm from PA. And from my research, and then when the attorney said last night, well, you know, working on these new ordinances, they come into effect even though they haven't even been approved yet. And I said, that doesn't make sense.
No, that doesn't make sense at all.
That's why I'm calling you and asking you.
So definitely what I would do is during the meetings, I would make a point to publicly explain that you cannot, regardless of what an attorney says, you cannot rely on or consider any kind of ordinance that has not been duly enacted yet. However, because we don't get our rights from the government, they don't need specific permission in order to utilize their property, and there's nothing in the current law that prohibits them from using that property in that way. And if you want any kind of backing on that, I don't have the Pennsylvania Constitution memorized by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a link to it on my website. If you go there, you can type in constitutions, and then there's a page that will have links to all 50 state constitutions. And you can find something. It'll usually, your first part of your constitution, your state constitution, is most states, it's a Declaration of Rights. And that's probably where you will find something that kind of goes along with what I'm about to say. But regardless, even if you don't find a state provision, go to your U.S. Constitution, and I'm going to pull mine out here to make sure that my all my medical issues haven't made me lose my mind completely. But in the 9th Amendment, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So this is our unenumerated rights. This is where it is unequivocally recognized that we have rights, and just because we specifically protect them in the Constitution or in the law in certain ways doesn't mean that we don't have other rights. We don't have to look to a law to be able to say we have a right to do something. So that's the 9th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Okay.
So that could be something, that should be something, if I were you, that is definitely something that I would bring up at your Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. So
I will.
Did I answer the question for you, or did you have any other aspects to that?
Yes, and well, then my other question is the residents that will come, and they did a petition. So how would you deal with their petition?
It depends. So I don't know if your jurisdiction has, if it's some sort of legal petition that they have followed some sort of legal procedures, and therefore, there's certain steps that you have to take by law that recognize that. But let's just say it's somebody just grabbed a piece of paper and they just wrote down, we don't want this group home here. And then they had as many of their neighbors sign it as they could. And there's nothing really official about it. In that case, I would consider it. But, if it, I guess let me put it this way. I would ask questions of the person who's wanting to put the property in. I would ask, what kinds of implications there would be. So, is there going to be a greater influx of traffic because of it being a group home? How many residents would be there? Presumably, there'd only be one resident per bedroom, typically in a group home of that kind of nature. That's, if I'm thinking of the same kind of group home, that's what it is. So, if the house is a typical sized house for the neighborhood, then no, you're probably not going to have an increased use of traffic. Is there, and I guess let me back up and say, because there's way too many ifs. What kind of group home? Is this for developmentally disabled? Is it like an adult foster care? Okay. So.
Yeah, intellectual,
disabilities.
And autism.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not a situation where there's, it's not, and I'm not saying that they couldn't do it in another scenario, but if you contrast it to like a rehabilitation home, right? Where somebody is struggling with addiction for drugs and alcohol, I could see that might be that would be a bigger concern, because you might potentially have people relapsing and bringing additional drugs and alcohol into the neighborhood, things of that nature. There might be gang affiliations or something like that. But for developmentally disabled individuals, by and large, there's no gang affiliations, there's no drug or alcohol use, there's no promiscuity, there's no, all the things that they might be worried about bringing into their neighborhood, or being, some sort of bad influence on their kids or whatever, it's not going to be a thing. And so it's, how would it harm them? I'm not seeing any way where having a group of developmentally disabled adults housed in a group home in a residential setting, how that would harm other property owners. So unless there's a specific tangible concern, where you could see, maybe the way that this person wants to do it is, somehow intruding upon the use of neighboring properties, I guess, there could be some sort of problem with that. But again, I don't think you need any special considerations, because let's say they're worried about it being loud because there's, people with autism or other disabilities where they might have, Tourette's, or they might have whatever. They might have issues where they might scream from time to time or have literally adult temper tantrums, something of that nature. How is that, you have noise ordinances, first of all. I'm going to guess that you have noise ordinances. Typically those are in the evening hours. And how would that be any different than when you have, a 7-year-old having a child temper tantrum out in the backyard because mom and dad said it's time to come in and you need to do your homework now, or, get ready for bed, or whatever the situation is. And the kid's being a brat and says no. I mean, it's in that sense, it's not going to be any different. So, whatever their concern is, there's likely already a law on the books, an ordinance on the books that covers that. And unless there's a specific harm to the, neighboring properties, just saying they don't want it there, that's too bad. Quite frankly, that is just too bad, because the property owner has a right to use their property in that way. And if he chooses to use it in that way, then the people who he allows to have living there have a right to live there, right? They're going to have some sort of landlord-tenant contract, and they'll have a right to live there.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Landlord-tenant contract. And this is through a reputable organization that's doing this, who's gone through the regulations of the state. But these people think that people like with disabilities are going to run loose and they're going to kill them.
Oh my goodness.
The
Okay.
neighbors.
So that's
The extremes of
yes.
what I've heard last night from people.
So that is mob rule based on fear. And that's exactly the problem that we had when you had a bunch of crazy psychos during COVID trying to, I had death threats because I was telling people that they could burn their masks because they weren't helping anyway in a scientific way, but they're not constitutionally allowed to be required. And I had people literally sending me death threats because they're saying that I was killing people. No, your fear has no basis in reality, and there's no tangible relationship between your fear and what my actions are. And, so at any rate, it's important that you recognize the will of the people. However, we don't have a pure democracy. We have a constitutional republic. And so that is to make sure that we don't have mob rule and just, the unknown fear of something override the rights of individuals. So we still have individual rights, even though we have, collective needs as a society, we have individual rights. So, if they're afraid that they're going to have, developmentally disabled individuals living in the community and they might get out and harm them or kill them, they are far more likely, just factually speaking, they are far more likely to have a serial killer living next door that they don't even recognize as a serial killer because he's a smooth talker and he's slick and he holds a full-time job, and than they are to be harmed by a person with intellectual disabilities. So, just people with intellectual disabilities, by and large, if they're even guilty of violent offenses, by and large, it's because they have been horribly abused and they finally lashed out against their abuser, or they were extremely, extremely manipulated by someone without intellectual disabilities to being the fall guy for something. So, no, it's totally unfounded to say that just because somebody wants to have a group home, that's going to endanger the community in any way.
Yeah, and also stating that their property values will go down, which is ridiculous.
Exactly, and that is totally not abstract. It's I'm losing all the words that I want, but it's not a certain thing. It's just something. It's conjecture. It's something they're worried about, and again, it depends on, if you have a next door neighbor that paints their house. Okay, so let me put it this way. I live in a neighborhood and they've been, a lot of them are rentals and they've been painting them and sometimes fixing them up and sometimes not fixing them up. And so just down the street, a few houses down, there's a house that during one of the hurricanes, their fence was totally demolished. Just hanging in different directions. And then their garage door was caved in or busted in somehow. And they have left the garage door with just basically a tarp over it, covering the whole garage door opening. And the fence they left for months just hanging in different directions. That brought down the value of the neighborhood. That house looks like trash. But they have a right to that property. And they also, according to our municipality, can't go fixing that much of their fence without additional permits and fees and all these other things, not to mention the cost of materials. And so I'm sure they were trying to figure out what in the world they were going to do. How can they possibly make all these repairs? Which ones do they even make? Do they just tear stuff down? What do they do? So even though it was bringing down the value of the neighborhood, it wasn't doing so in such a way that they should have been forced to do any specific thing by the local government. So again, if the guy wants to put a group home in, that's not going to harm the value any more than if he paints it bright pink and purple. Because who wants to live next to a bright pink and purple house, right? You go like, whoa.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. There's another house a few streets down from me, but in my neighborhood where we walk, that they have an insane amount of yard decorations. Literally the entire yard. You can't go more than 12 inches before if you were in their yard, you couldn't go more than 12 inches before you touched the next yard decoration. And it's not even all like one motif. It's just a whole bunch of junk and it looks ridiculous. But it is what it is. That's on their property. It's not on my property. They're not directly impeding my ability to use my property. And they see it as decorations. I mean, it's not, they aren't literally putting trash. It is just, you know, maybe if they had 1 or 2 of these decorations, they would be fine, or even 10, but they have hundreds. So at any rate, I mean, that's the kind of thing that, yeah, I would think that's going to bring down the value of the neighborhood because it looks trashy. But that doesn't mean that that somehow is a direct impact to me that would force them to do something about it. So I don't know if those kind of give you a different way of seeing that to address some of those examples of, well, they're going to ruin the value of the neighborhood. Prove it. You know what I mean? That's,
Okay.
That's kind of the response.
Are we, you know, like I said, this is my first meeting, so when people get up, can I ask them to prove it?
Well, yeah,
What
so
you're saying?
I would be respectful. So I would say, you know,
Yeah.
when you have people doing, and I don't know exactly the decorum or the procedures, how it's laid out in your, you know, your meetings, but let's say, you know, somebody has their 3 minutes to speak during public comment time, and then let's say, you know, everybody has their speech, right? And then you have the opportunity to speak afterwards as board members. I would utilize that time to say, listen, I totally understand where there's concerns. Anytime that something is new and we have heard rumors or we have fears, we're going to be concerned and we want to make sure that our neighborhood isn't negatively impacted. We're not going to be harmed in some way and we want to protect ourselves. I totally get that. However, the concerns are unfounded. Putting a group home into a residential neighborhood is not known to, there are no facts to say that this is going to drop the value of your property. Simply, in fact, most people are not even going to know. Because most of the time, these residential facilities, there's not even a sign in the yard. It's just a house, right? It's a house in the neighborhood and you wouldn't know who's there. What's the difference between, you know, I have 2 girls that are older, they're in their 20s, and they have their, you know, a boyfriend, and one of them has a boyfriend, one of them has a fiance, and they all live in the same house. They're renting it. What is the difference between those 4 young individuals renting a house together in the Grand Rapids area versus if it was 2 doors down and it's 4 developmentally disabled individuals who are tenants and renting the same house? It is the same scenario, only you have somebody who's coming in to help them take their medicine or help them, you know, drive them around to get them their groceries and meet their needs, take them to their doctor's appointments. But that doesn't, you know, somebody needing medical care, that's okay. What's the difference between the elderly lady 3 doors the other direction that has to have home health nurses come in and take care of her? Do you know what I mean? So
Yes.
whatever their concern is, it's unfounded in reality, and there's no basis to stop the rights of the property owner or of those tenants from being there. So I would start with saying, I understand what, you know, I'm hearing your concerns, but these are not founded in fact. These are worries, but these are not things that are certainties that will happen. And we also can't take your rights to use your own property and somehow have the collective of all of you and using your own properties, somehow that doesn't override the right of this property owner to use his property. And what matters is that there's nothing on the books that prohibits him from using his property in this way. So our job as the government is not to step in because mob rule wants something done a certain way. Our job is to make sure that that the constitutionally enacted laws are properly enforced, and there is no law that's stopping him from using his property in this way. Therefore, we cannot stop him from using his property this way. So that's what I would do. I would explain it very articulately, the best you can, to, you know, have bullet points in front of you so that you can explain to people so that they don't just think you're ignoring what they're saying. You are hearing them. You are listening to what they're talking about. If you think you do need to ask them more questions, fine. But at this point, I would just say, because likely it's not going to be a dialogue between the two of you. Likely it's going to be the people are speaking during public comment time, and then you will be speaking after that. And so, you have the opportunity to listen, but not necessarily ask direct questions. And so I would say, I've listened to the 12 of you or the 25 of you or whatever that showed up and all the concerns that you had, but I am not hearing a single fact, a certainty that translates all these worries and these concerns into a reality for what's actually going to happen. And we can't prohibit a property owner from using their property based on fears and conjecture that other property owners have. So that's the way that I would handle that. And I served on a downtown development authority and a planning commission board, and my husband was on the zoning board of appeals before. So we definitely, and I was on years after that, I was on a township board, where basically like the city council for the community. So, you want to make sure people feel heard and understood, but you don't have to agree with them to hear them out. So.
Well, that's exactly the way you put it, is exactly the way that I was thinking it should be done.
Well, I hope I hope that can help you to be able to go in that right direction and be able to share that knowledge with, and if you want to share this part of the video with others that are on your board to get them to think about things before they go into the meeting, by all means, go ahead and do that, and maybe it'll help them as well.
I hope so.
Well, thank you very much for calling in, and
well, thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the outcome of the meeting, so let us know.
Yeah, it's next Monday, so when the next time I'll call in and say how it went, because I know it's going to be chaotic. From what people were talking about last night. So.
All right. Well, 2 weeks from now, we have our next show, so I'll look forward to hearing from you then.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it.
Yep. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
All right, guys. So give me a second here. I did see a question that I didn't get to before that call. Savannah asked, I have a nursing license in Michigan and we're required to do a program called implicit bias. I find that to be so offensive and it's expensive. Is that legal? As far as what's legal, I haven't kept up on every single law. They're constantly changing, right? Which they shouldn't be. That's not the point of our legislatures, is to constantly pass new laws. But they have, and they do, and I haven't kept up on all of the licensing changes. What I can tell you is that I know where it's coming from, and I myself have gone through a lot of trainings on implicit bias, and my husband is also fighting that in his own workplace. It's a Michigan-owned company, but he's down here in Florida, but the parent company is a West Michigan-owned company. And so anyway, that's interesting because right now you have President Trump's executive order trying to set aside and stop all the DEI initiatives. I don't remember the wording of that executive order, but if I were you, I would grab that executive order, read it thoroughly, and combine that with the U.S. Constitution, as well, your First Amendment rights, your Ninth Amendment. Also, I would even say, is it your 10th Amendment? No, that's not it. Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution. I believe it's Article 1, Section 10 of the Michigan State Constitution. I believe they both have the same provision that do not allow the government to impact contracts. basically. So they can't get in the way of you continuing to have an employment contract by, interfering with this and stopping you from having your license renewed because of this, right? This has nothing to do with you providing the service that you do or the work that you do. So I will tell you that there can be value in having a course like this because we all have bias, but the way that the classes are done are often, it's only white people. If you're white, you're racist and you're biased and you're awful, and no one who's not white is racist. Like if you're black, if you're Asian, if you're Hispanic, you're not racist, but if you're white, you're racist. That's how far too many of the courses come out. We all have an individual bias, though. So for a large part, I agree with the classes as they were done when I took them. And I took them through, in a large part, through the Dispute Resolution Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan, when I was a mediator and restorative justice facilitator there. And because the way that they were described is it has nothing to do with, whether, regardless of what color skin you are, regardless of your sexual orientation, you have certain bias based on your upbringing, based on your cultural norms. We all have difference in how we do things, and it can lead to how we view the world. Our experiences change how we view the world, and how we view the world can reflect on how we bring a bias to a certain situation, right? I have a bias towards children. For example, my husband and my kids, they know if there's a commercial that comes on TV and there's a cute little baby, like the diaper commercials, and there's a cute little baby butt, or if there's a little baby on the, on the sidewalk walking with their parents when, we're out and about. If I see a little baby, they know that they're going to turn around and see me just smiling from ear to ear because I love babies. So my husband's lucky that we didn't have 10 or 12 kids. We just raised 4.5, 5. So anyway, but it's, so I have a bias towards defending people, defending children. In fact, I recognized my own bias. And when I was a public defender, I was once assigned to defend someone who was accused of child abuse. And given the facts of the case, I had to go and tell the judge I needed to be reassigned because I said this person has a right to be given zealous representation. And given the facts that are, in the case file, I cannot be the one to provide that zealous representation. My bias towards protecting children is far too strong, and I cannot provide the representation that that individual is required to have. So I asked to be reassigned. So at any rate, there can be, but that's not your question. I realize that. So your question is it legal? And I honestly don't know the current state of Michigan statutes to know if they can require that. But to fight back, one tool you can use is, like I said, Donald Trump's DEI executive order. Another tool you can use is Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution and Article 1, Section 10 of the Michigan Constitution, where they're prohibiting, interfering with your ability to have your normal business contracts. And you have your Ninth Amendment rights, as well as, let's see, Michigan State Constitution also has an unenumerated rights section that I believe is even worded a little bit better. No, I take that back. It's worded exactly the same as the U.S. Constitution. Ninth Amendment. What else was there, though? Your First Amendment. Your First Amendment protected rights. And there's definitely some. Now, the Michigan State Constitution kind of breaks up the First Amendment rights into a few different areas, because you have like speech and press and this and then, freedom of religion, and it's broken down into separate parts of the Declaration of Rights in the Michigan Constitution. But anyway, I would utilize those to put together some sort of response. It's not going to be an easy battle, but I think all of those things combined, and the cherry on the top will be President Trump's executive order against DEI initiatives, which would include the implicit bias. So hopefully that can be of use to you. And let's see. Oh, question. Your opinion on nullification and why we can't learn to use it effectively. I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about jury nullification, and if you're asking about, so Amy was asking your opinion on nullification and why we can't learn to use it effectively. So I don't know exactly what is meant there, but assuming that you just mean my opinion in general on jury nullification, that's where they recognize the law says XYZ, but they think that the law is wrong and they refuse to enforce that law in a particular case. I think that is not a smart way to go. It's a smart way to go on a case-by-case basis, maybe, if you have nothing else to go with. But I would rather see people change the law. I would rather see there be even a court case. Now, you know how I feel about case law, because there is no such thing, but using case precedent. But I would rather there be case precedent from a court of appeals, or even better, a Supreme Court case that essentially nullified a law than to go with jury nullification. Why? Because it's a case-by-case basis. And it is it's a wild card. It's not very likely. And it's something that there's no procedures requiring it. Whereas following the law or making an argument based on a constitutional, or constitutionally protected right, that's something that is required. There's a procedure for that. And if the jury doesn't follow that, if the judge doesn't follow that, you can appeal it to the next level. If that court doesn't follow it, you can appeal that to the Supreme Court, et cetera, et cetera. There's more of a way to fight back. But sorry, I'm gonna make myself a note about that. So if you lose, let's say you put all your eggs in one basket and you're focusing on trying to get jury nullification and that doesn't work, where does that leave you? Because you then have not, you have then not laid the foundation for a good appeal, because you're probably not laying the good factual foundation for an appeal. You're probably not laying the best foundation for the legal arguments, the objections, the motions, the pretrial motions, the post-trial motions, the during trial motions, all the things. I've done several videos on those before, and I want you guys to take a look at those if you haven't. If you are worried about, specific, ongoing types of cases, that's why I would say jury nullification is not something I would waste my time on, because there's so much up in the air with it, and it's just statistically not a likely outcome. And it's not, generally speaking, it's just not something that's appealable. If you don't get the desired result, then there's no good grounds to be able to appeal from it. So I hope that answers your question. I might have misinterpreted your question, but speaking of questions, oh my goodness. Okay, I guess I must have skipped. I apologize, guys. I had been scrolling, looking for questions. I thought it had continued to scroll with me, and it didn't, and I was all the way at the bottom wondering why it's not scrolling anymore. So you guys have had some great conversations. I'm going to just look really quick and see. I'm not seeing any more that say question. Okay, that was the nursing license question. And nullification. Okay, so I might have gotten all the questions. You guys have had a lot of conversation back and forth. So not speaking of jury nullification. Okay. Oh, okay. So I just happened to see, that was quite a while ago. So I'm not sure, Amy, if I probably had no, I'm trying to see here if I missed another clarification from, I don't see any other questions. And All right. Sorry, guys. It just scrolled again. It jumped. So I don't know if I just missed, if it just skipped over a bunch that you did have. I see a question that just says, what about ADA laws? And I'm not sure what that's in relation to. That might have been regarding that group home conversation that we were having. Or maybe you're just asking in a totally separate question about Americans with Disability Act types of scenarios. But anyway, so okay. So Amy, you said great show today. Hopefully that means I answered your question. So anyway, thanks guys for tuning in today. Sorry we had issues where we supposedly went live. All I could see for the first 10 minutes was my comments and Lori's comments. And it was giving me no feedback on anybody being live. And I had to go live twice within the same broadcast. So I'm not sure how that works, but you know, technology, it hates me. So anyway, I appreciate you guys joining today, and I encourage you to join us again in 2 weeks from today. I'm going to be honest, I have been extremely worn out. My allergies have not been helping, but you know, I'm still not 100%. I'm nowhere near 100% yet. And have some, you know, kind of new small concerns about the cancer stuff. Nothing's a big deal at this point, but just something I'm a little worried about. And so it's just kind of more getting with me, and that's why I didn't quite get to get everything set up yesterday for today's show. But fear not, I am feeling well enough and committed enough to being able to answer your questions of a legal or constitutional nature that every second and fourth Tuesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, we will be live. And if we're not live right away at noon, just hang in there, because just like today, I'm at the computer, I'm hitting go live, it's just not going live, but we will make it work one way or another. So I'm glad we were able to make it work and be able to still take calls and things like that today. But I will see you guys 2 weeks from today for our next live show, and I will also get our newsletter sent out. I've been doing that once every 2 weeks as well. So if you're interested in seeing the news articles and getting updates on making sure you're catching all the videos, the short ones, the long ones, all the stuff in between that I've been posting, go ahead and sign up for our newsletter. You can do that at our website. It's in the footer. There's a quick button you just put in. It takes you all of 10 seconds to sign up for our newsletter. So go ahead and do that. Again, our website is, I can't believe I forgot to do that. There we go. RestoreFreedomKH.com. You can support our efforts at RestoreFreedomKH.com/donate. Every dollar helps, truly. Even if you only have $5 to donate today and you might never have enough funds to donate again, I totally understand, but every single dollar helps. Also, I wanted to tell you guys, I have completely revamped, I should have talked about this earlier, but I completely revamped a big page on our website. So RestoreFreedomKH.com/OBCase. You can remember that, write it down, go there. Otherwise, you could just go to our website and go to the resources tab, which is one of them that I also have shown here on the screen. But if you go to the resources tab, and then you'll see case documents, the very first case that I talk about on there is the Ormond Beach case. So if you go ahead and click that, that's a second way to get there other than just typing in RestoreFreedomKH.com/OB case, stands for Ormond Beach case. But anyway, I have totally revamped that because the last time I had put anything on there was, I believe, the very beginning of May of last year. And you would think that there wouldn't have been a whole heck of a lot, but I had stuff, we had hearings in the magistrate tribunal, we had hearings and stuff going on with the circuit court, we had pleadings going on in the Court of Appeals, and it's a mess. So I changed how things appear. So I now have it separated out. You can see all the things that have been filed with the magistrate at one level, and then another section is just circuit court filings, and the next one is just the Court of Appeals filings. and you can see the multiple versions that the of my briefs, and other words, petitions that the Court of Appeals has made me file. The latest version they made me file was actually on Valentine's Day. So not even a month ago, they made me refile. That was the 5th petition that they made me file, or brief. And then I had to then refile my reply brief. The whole thing's a nightmare. But anyway, I want you guys to see the nightmare as it unfolds for me. First of all, so you know how hard I'm fighting for you and your freedom. This isn't just about my case. No, I don't want to win my case. Like in Allegan, I didn't want to win my case just for me. I am furious that I won my case based on where my vehicle was parked. I wanted to win my case in a way that would have lasting impacts for everybody in Michigan or even beyond. I mean, I was devastated that I won my case in a way that literally doesn't do anything to help anybody else, even in Allegan County, Michigan. So this case has the potential to help homeowners across the country, certainly homeowners across the state of Florida, definitely homeowners in Volusia County and in the city of Ormond Beach. And I want to win in that way where it's going to help all of you. But in the meantime, whether I win this case or not, or even just in the meantime, while we're waiting for a reply from the Court of Appeals on this case, the legal arguments in there are something that you can utilize or something that you can benefit from. Quite frankly, even the lady that called in on, you would think, an unrelated issue, right? She's on the other side. She's on a zoning board of appeals, and it's an issue about a group home, an adult disabled group home. What does that have anything to do with me and my pavers and my privacy fence, right? Oh, but it does. And so there are United States Supreme Court quotes in there. There are arguments on, the Constitution. A lot of the whole argument is set up based on the Constitution. Now, do I quote specifics for our local code of ordinances or land development code? Yeah, I mean, that's what my case is about. Do I quote specifics for Michigan court rules Florida court rules or Florida statutes? Yeah, I do. But even those can help you gain an understanding of what you could be looking for in your own statutes, in your own codes or ordinances. But regardless, all the U.S. constitutional issues or U.S. Supreme Court cases that I cite in there, you can use those regardless of what state you're in. And they would definitely be relevant to the callers today. Even about the licensing issues, the questions we had about that. So I would encourage you to go ahead and check out that page, restorefreedomkh.com/obcase. Even if you've checked it out before, it's a lot different now. And the only thing I don't have linked on there is I wanted to provide the direct links for either the audio or video of the various hearings that we've had. And I don't know where all that is. I wasn't the one that did all that and recorded all that, and I'm not sure where it ended up. So I know I have it somewhere because I was able to send it to the transcriptionist, but I will have to work on that for you guys and get that up there. But the transcripts are up there from every single hearing that we've had, so you can at least read the transcripts of what was said. And the documents are up there. Looks like Lori put the link directly in the live chat on YouTube here. So make sure to check that out. And like I said, there's just a wealth of information on there. I will continue to put more documents, more Supreme Court briefs, more things that I've worked on throughout the years as I'm trying to feel better, but I'm also trying to spend time on putting these other short videos together and trying to share with you, even just to put simple posts up about different court cases that are happening or whatever. Those take me time because I gotta, whatever. It's not my thing, right? I'm not the computer person. I'm not a marketing expert. So each of those steps takes me a lot of time. But anyway, so I encourage you to check that out. And in the meantime, like I said, any donations that you can send our way would be greatly appreciative for that. So with that, I think I am done for the day. I don't see any more questions. So thank you for all those. Annie, John, Wanda, James, Mike, Jay Curvitt, everybody out there that has been joining our discussion and conversations today. I appreciate all of that, and I appreciate your support and joining us today. Join us 2 weeks from today, noon that Tuesday, and even if you don't get the notification ahead of time, we will be going live then. So thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time.
Our work to restore freedom would not be possible without support from people just like you. From the various software and hardware needed to the legal research materials, every dollar you can donate helps. Make sure to like and share this video too. And remember to follow and subscribe and click that notification button. Together, we can restore freedom.